Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you for joining us today. J. Krishnamurti was thought by many to be a modern-day equivalent of the Buddha. In fact, he was once considered to be the second coming of Christ. While many may think it's wonderful to live and work in close proximity with such a person, well, it's difficult to understand the depth of what this means and how challenging this might be. In the book, Knocking at the Door, author R.E. Mark Lee provides an ordinary person view of what being close up and working together with such a man means, how it challenges one at every turn, and how it causes one to question ceaselessly even more deeply than ordinarily would. R.E. Mark Lee grew up in Santa Barbara, California, received his master's degree in education in 1977 from the University of California. Most of his professional career was spent in schools in India and the USA, was a principal from 1965 to 1972 in a junior high school, founding director of the Oak Grove School at Ojai, California from 1975 to 1985, served as executive director of the Krishnamurti Foundation of America for 25 years. He's edited more than 20 books by J. Krishnamurti and continues to serve as trustee for the foundation in India and America. And for the past 45 years has lived in Ojai, California with his wife and daughters, enjoying plenty of sunshine out there. Mark Lee, our guest on the program. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the program.
Hello, hello. Happy to be with you.
It is great to have you with us on the program. It's a fascinating book, Knock at the Open Door. And I just want to set the background. Let's go back to the 1950s. You're growing up in sunny California, but you've got a lot of questions as a youth, don't you? You were sort of disenchanted with what you saw in the world, and you had some big questions. Talk about your state of mind at the time and why you were so inquisitive and challenging things.
Well, I grew up at a time when things were fairly quiet and dull in the youth culture, and I began to look and see that things that people took for granted, the influence of the church, pop culture, and so on, all of them just didn't seem to really address the major issues of life and living. So I started to I think differently, to question and to doubt and to inquire. And this put me on the outs with my classmates, with my family, because I didn't go along with the crowd. That really started me off because I started to look at things and ask questions. And I found that in the 50s, young people didn't ask questions. There wasn't that revolutionary
spirit
that developed later in the 60s.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to ask questions. I guess you just accepted and move on from there, which you didn't do. And you had a friend that introduced you to the teachings of J. Krishnamurti. Let's first of all talk about who Krishnamurti is. I mentioned the role he had in the introduction of the program. Talk about exactly who he is, how you were introduced, and this really changed your life, didn't it?
Yes, it began in a very simple way. A friend just gave me a book, and I looked at the book, and to begin with, wasn't too impressed, but I couldn't put it down. I just kept reading, and I kept it between the mattress and the box spring of my bed. My mother found it and was threatening to throw it out because she thought it was subversive literature. But she didn't throw it out, and I kept reading. And I found that this man was asking questions of me, was asking questions of the culture, and in ways that no one in my environment, certainly not in school, quite questioned. So this drew me further and further into it. He didn't offer anything, no belief system, no thoughts and ideas that you could live by. It certainly wasn't like Norman Vincent Peale or any of the authors of the day who gave you a direction and something to live by. No, Krishnamurti followed in this vein of asking readers, asking people who were thoughtful and perhaps a little serious, to find out what was important in living, rather than simply accepting what culture and television and books and grandmother said was important. So that appealed to me greatly.
What were some of the questions that he had you ask yourself that challenged yourself and maybe led you to know more about who you are?
Well, of course, the essential one was, who are you?
Yes.
Where did you come from? Why do you think the way you think? Why do you behave the way you behave? And are you original, or are you just a copy of what culture and books and television tell you you should be? So that was a very important question for a teenager to start to look at. And teenagers really most teenagers have serious identity problems. And they want to be like everyone else. They don't want to stand out. But I saw that I didn't want to be like everyone else. I wanted to find out who I was and what made me tick. So his questioning, his self-reflection, or appeal to that self-reflection, drove me further and further into questioning everything around me. Of course, he said at the same time that you can question to the point where you're left with nothing but ashes, and you have to keep questioning on a leash. It can go to the extreme.
Yes.
You can be left with nothing. So you start to learn to be a little cautious, watchful, and this watching quality, this listening quality, not running headlong into it, led me into discovering, without even knowing the word, discovering what meditation was.
Our guest on the program is R.E. Mark Lee. We're talking about the book Knocking at the Open Door. The book is available all across the country. You can get information by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on directly to Mark's website, which is remarklee.net. Again, the name of the book is Knocking at the Door. When you were introduced to his teachings, that had a tremendous impact on your life. And then in 1965, you actually meet him, which again influenced your life dramatically. Talk about that certain magnetism when you met him.
Well, it was quite an event. I just went to hear him speak in a big circus tent in the middle of the beautiful valleys of Switzerland, and I had been reading his books, of course, but actually to hear him speak, it was the fact that he was so unpretentious, so utterly simple. Just he walked in, sat down on an ordinary wooden chair, took off his sweater, and just started to talk. There was no fanfare. There was nothing that you might expect for a famous public speaker. No introduction, in fact. And everything that he's talked about resonated with me. I just began to feel that this man was talking pure intelligence. This was a mature person speaking. This was not some hyped-up pop culture expert or guru. This was someone who was really speaking to each person in the audience. He was not making big public statements. He was addressing ordinary human issues. And this was hugely impressive.
And you decided that you were going to work with him, teaching in schools that followed his philosophy, working, as I mentioned, in the foundations. Talk about that aspect of your life and why that has been so important to you and the people that you've been to challenge just like he did you back so many years ago.
Yes, well, he invited me to work in one of his schools in India. I accepted the challenge, and he said, well, in those days, of course, Americans going to India was usually related to some exotic Swami or guru or drug culture connection. And he said, maybe you won't last in India. We'll give it 6 months and see what you think about it. Well, I went to India and fell in love with India. Didn't want to leave. So I took advantage of the opportunity and worked very hard in India for a period of 8 years to discover really what was the educational approach that he was suggesting. So he had 5 schools in India. I taught in one for 8 years, visited all the other schools, and then eventually, after that period, and also getting married and having children, I moved to California, where he asked me to start a new school in America, which I did. And all these schools, the ones in India, the one in California, and a high school in England, all had at their core what we refer to as religious education. So this term is used in a very different way than is normally used. Religious, not in the sense of it being some organized belief system, but religious in its original sense, that religion has to do with looking, listening, being careful, being sensitive about life. So the elements of a religious education are common to all the schools, and they offer a parallel curriculum alongside the academic, which is probably the easiest part in any school culture to achieve, the academic part. The psychological part is more complex, more difficult, but it runs parallel, and in a good school, it doesn't even have to be a Krishnamurti school, these elements can be incorporated into the curriculum.
I mentioned, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention a couple of them to give you a sense that to help a child to learn how to look with attention in the moment and to understand that awareness obviates choice, and to learn how to just listen without thinking and listen without concentration, and to learn about comparison and compassion. These are some of the basic elements of what we call a religious approach to education, having to do with awakening the sensitivity and awareness in a young learner.
And what kind of results do you see in students as you're teaching this approach? Is it something that you almost see come over them? What came over you when you were exposed to this at an early age?
I think what we see in the schools, and this is not a claim that all graduates from a Krishnamurti school are this way, but some do really benefit from it and really come out different. And that is, we find that they are more sensitive, more awake, more aware of what it means to live without identity, religious, traditional religious, political identity, that is not belonging just to one school of thought, one nation, having a worldview, global identity as opposed to a national identity, thinking about things differently, challenging accepted norms, being outliers as opposed to being joiners. These qualities seem to be common among some of the students who leave our schools.
The book is called Knocking at the Open Door. The author is R.E. Mark Lee, our guest on the program. His website is an excellent website, great information there, remarklee.net, that was powered by Strat Advertising, did an excellent job in the website. A few minutes left in the program. I mentioned in the beginning, challenging. You would almost think in this situation that this would be like a gift, and it probably was in a sense, but I mentioned that you were challenged and you questioned yourself ceaselessly. In fact, does that still happen today?
It doesn't stop.
I got that impression, yes.
It's it's an infectious thing. You can't possibly exist in a culture, survive in a culture, if you don't ask questions of it. Otherwise, you become just a cipher. You become lost in a belief system, a way of living that is mindless, that has no creativity, no liveliness, no appreciation for joy and beauty. So this way of living, of questioning, of appreciation of beauty, this is something that goes on for your whole life. And it does add dimensions. It does create a life that is uncommon. It's unusual because you're not caught in the mainstream of sorrow and belief and the conflicts that come with false identities.
A minute or so left in the program. I would like to talk about the book is an excellent read. It is one that will expand your mind as you're reading and get you to ask questions as well. What do you hope the audience, the readers, will take away from reading Knocking at the Open Door? What lesson do you want us to take away after reading the book?
Well, what I hope the reader would do is to begin to look at the education of young people in a different way, to see that education is not simply an intellectual affair and one that leads to a good job, that they would begin to see that education till this century has been a sorry spectacle of young people being trained, coerced into memorizing, into believing things, rather than to awaken their intelligence, their independent thinking, their some sense of psychological freedom. So I would hope that they would look at it not only in terms of education for youth and their own children, but also in terms of their own life and living, and how they approach this incredible culture that we're in, this culture with so much conflict, so much unhappiness, so much duplicity and convention. Begin to look at things in a different way. And that looking really depends on a person's own inner being, whether they are at least calm and contemplative and can see things for what they are without the illusion that normal culture fosters.
What was writing this book like for you? I got the impression in looking through this that it probably just sort of reinforced again what you have learned all through your life and in being and working and following J. Krishnamurti. What was this like as in writing the book? Did it just sort of reinforce everything?
Well, it did. Fortunately, I had kept diaries through my whole life. I've had a copious habit of writing. So I've kept records of things that people said and situations. So that helped to refresh my memory as I began to write. And I didn't relive the previous 50 years. I lived it. I was living it all the time anyway. I was living in this state of questioning, doubting, examining, challenging, and it still continues now in my old age. I still have that state of mind, and I encourage that in the young people that I come in touch with. So I think that there's really no difference between the youth culture and the older aged people, because if they can look with a clear mind, a mind that is not burdened with prejudice, is not burdened with beliefs, will see things in a reality that is clean and will have a perception that is creative.
It is a very powerful book. It will get you to rethink the way you think. The book is called Knocking at the Open Door. The author is R.E. Mark Lee. His website is remarklee.net. Of course, you can link directly onto Mark's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, a unique perspective with a number of years working with the eminent world teacher J. Krishnamurti. Mark, a pleasure having you with us on the program. Thank you so much. Excellent job with the book, and I hope it gets people thinking about things you mentioned with the whole educational system and the way we're going there. It really is an important book, and thank you for sharing it with us on the program today.
My thanks to you for having me on, and just to remember that everything that you do in life counts.
The book is Knocking at the Open Door. The author, our guest, R.E. Mark Lee. His website, once again, remarklee.net. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back after these messages.